Hello, everyone, and welcome to OHSCA Interviews. I'm Vincenzo Calla, and I'm the host for today's episode. Today, I'm happy to have with me the Member of Parliament for Simcoe North, Adam Chambers. Adam was recently elected in the September election with 43% of the vote. Previously, Adam worked as a senior advisor to Canada's Minister of Finance, Jim Flaherty. After this experience, Adam served as assistant vice president at one of Canada's largest financial institutions. Adam is a community volunteer, and over the past 6 years, Adam has been a member of the board of directors for Waypoint Centre for Mental Health in Penetanguishene. Adam currently serves as the Deputy Shadow Minister for Finance and Middle Class Prosperity. Thank you, Adam, for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Vincenzo, for the invite.
We're glad to have you here, and we're going to start off with our interview with the question and answer segment, and all of these questions are asked by members of our high school team. So the first question is, why did you decide to run to be the MP for Simcoe North?
Sure. The previous member of Parliament, Bruce Stanton, who had been a very, very excellent member for almost 16 years, had decided to retire. And after a long career and serving the people of Simcoe North very, very well, what happens is there's a nomination process under which the party members select, who they would like to represent the party in the riding in the next election. I have been involved with conservative politics for almost 15 years myself, or just over 15 years myself, and have been interested in politics for a lot longer. So even from when I was in elementary school and high school, I've always, watched the news, current events, talked about politics with my parents around the dinner table. And, really what drew me to public service was I had the great opportunity to work for Minister Flaherty, as you mentioned. And, public services can be a very rewarding career, serving your community and your constituents, but also fighting for and standing up for some of the principles and the values that you believe are very important. And it's a very rewarding, job, serving people and trying to help them, navigate government. And as I say, advocating for issues that you feel passionately about. Right now is a very important time for the country. We have a pandemic happening. We have a lot of government debt and deficits that is supporting government spending. I am concerned about the fiscal situation in the country. That is to say, I think the government is spending more than what it receives every year, so that creates a deficit. And the longer you do that, the less ability that future governments have to deal with some of the challenges of their day. So really, I'm interested in making Canada and a better place and leaving for my children and future generations a country that's well positioned to take on the challenges of its day.
Well, you hit a lot of good topics there, and actually you hit a lot of topics that we'll be asking you questions about later. So great introduction as well. So like you said, this is such a crucial time in Canada. There's so much going wrong in Canada right now. There's so much happening in Canadian politics overall that needs to be fixed, I would say. And there's a lot that you as a parliamentarian, and a new one as well, can do to help and work with your colleagues. And like you said, it's creating, it's fixing things, I guess, and making sure that the next generation, your children, my generation, the younger generation, has a better Canada to work in and lead as well. It's all about that, and like you said, public service.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I would encourage any of your listeners and viewers to take a look at. There's a speech that my former boss, Minister Flaherty, gave, which if you search in search engine, public service is good for you. And I think, it's important to, when you think about your potential career as one does when they're young, it can take a bunch of different avenues. And the other thing I would say is, being an elected politician isn't the only role that you can have in public service, right? Of course, you could be in a government department as an example, or you could be, like I was previously, an advisor to a minister or an advisor to a politician, someone who works on public policy issues at a think tank, or potentially at an academic institution like a university or college. So I think there are lots of opportunities for people who are interested in public policy, say generally, or even just public service generally, to explore throughout a career, not necessarily being an elected politician, although that is an option. But there are lots of great opportunities within public service generally. And I include, by the way, in public service generally those who work at nonprofits and some very excellent organizations that help deliver much needed care and support to some of the most vulnerable in our society.
Well, for sure. And we'll go on to the next question soon, but just like you said, and I mean, former Minister Flaherty, Jim Flaherty, everybody misses him every day, especially as myself. I wasn't quite old enough to remember the content of his speeches, but I remember growing up watching the news a little bit, seeing him on, I guess my earliest memory might have been when I was really little. Maybe it was budget day or something like that, seeing him on the news. And I do remember, I was still kind of young, but I do remember when he passed away, I remember it was quite a shock, and it was saddening to everybody on the Hill, especially on our side of the benches and our side of the politics. But yeah, public service, like you said, he had many good speeches, and public service is good for you, like you said.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So we're going to go into the next question, which is, as a new MP, what challenges do you face when it comes to building relationships with all your new colleagues, and so you can work better together? And this comes from Evan in Ottawa.
Great question, Evan. What you often see on TV in terms of relationship building, or maybe lack of relationship between parties, kind of hyper partisan environment that we live in. If you only read Twitter or watch the nightly news, you'd think that nobody is friends across the aisle, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Of course, everyone has a team that they play on, and some long-standing principles that they advocate for. But the truth is, everybody who is in Ottawa, everyone who is elected, or serving those who are elected, all primarily have the same objective, and everyone wants to make Canada a better place and leave it in a better spot for future generations. Where we differ or where we disagree, the debates are on how we get there. But I think everybody has a general overall objective. And in particular, in a minority parliament, it is very important for all parties, including members from the government, but also the opposition parties, to find areas in which there are mutual agreement or interest on things to advocate for or promote. And so you'll see some of this in some committees. There's committee work that gets underway, and on the committees, they are apportioned based on, seats are given out based on the number of seats in Parliament. So of course, the Liberals will have the most number of seats, but it's not a majority. And you'll have, the Conservatives, the NDP, and the Bloc will make up the rest of the seats on these committees. Often you'll see collaboration and coordination between some of the opposition parties, or all of the opposition parties, to advance a study or a particular issue. For example, we just had an emergency committee meeting in finance a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and all parties, so Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, and the Bloc Québécois, all agreed that the finance committee would turn its resources to focusing on and studying inflation and what that means, and in particular in the housing market. And so that's an example of collaboration together, all parties working together to come up with some recommendations, but also some analysis of what we're seeing in terms of inflation and how it's affecting everyday Canadians. So there are lots of opportunities for people to reach out across the aisle, get together. There's things called private members bills, in which individual members of parliament get to bring forward their own pieces of legislation. I have an opportunity to do that in March or April. And my goal is to have my bill passed. And the only way that I'll have my bill passed is if I get a majority of MPs there to support my bill moving forward. And that will require me to develop relationships and to find mutual areas of agreement on a particular issue that I care about. And so, I've got a few ideas that I'm kicking around now, but most of the ideas I think are going to be well received by some of my colleagues who are in other parties. So that's a way in which that we all work together on a regular basis.
Well, that's some really good insight for sure. And especially now during a minority parliament, it's now a couple years of minority parliament now, started in 2019. And then obviously the election that split it up in 2021. But now again, back in a minority situation, working together is better than ever. And it means, and it's more important than ever now, especially now that the Liberals are very weak. Obviously, they're at figuratively weak, but also parliamentary weak in terms of their numbers. Their minority situation. We could go to an election at any time, so that's why it's important to have those relationships, right? So that you can hold it up and not have to go to another unnecessary election like we were just in.
That's exactly right. I mean, some people believe, if you listen to some of the pundits or columnists or experts talk about Canadian politics, I actually believe we're going to be in a string of minority parliaments. That, in fact, the majority government of 2015, the first Trudeau majority, or the first Trudeau election, which led to a majority, and the Harper majority in 2011 are actually the exceptions to the rule. If you consider most of the other elections in and around that time period, a lot of minority governments, which was at that time, relatively new, although, minority governments in 03, 06, 08, one in 19, again, another one in 20. And if, there's an election anytime soon, it's not clear to me, that there would be a majority government, either way. And so it's very important for all parties and, members and their political staff and frankly, those in the media to try to identify areas in which all parties are aligned. And there were some really good examples in the last election where, a particular policy proposal would have been in each party's platform. And so there's a couple examples. The one that comes to mind would be on, there's some measures on money laundering, which is kind of a term for when money, comes into Canada or is already in Canada, but has been obtained through illegal means, but then it gets kind of what they call cleaned or washed and then, re-enters the economy in a legitimate way. All of the parties actually had a policy platform plank that said, look, here's some things we're going to do about it. And frankly, there were one or two of these items that all parties agreed on. So I would expect that the governing party would bring forward some of those ideas in its legislation. And if it doesn't, I would expect that a member like myself might bring forward a piece of legislation, knowing that it already has kind of broad-based support as a way to advance that issue.
For sure. And I mean, obviously, we won't spend too much longer on this, but it's just, like you said, when all the parties are either on the same page or are similar to the page and want to get on the same page, it's just so important. And I think now I won't go too deep into this because we could probably talk for hours about this, but I had Mike Lake on the show a couple months ago. I had Anna Roberts on last week talking about mental health. And that's also another thing that I know that pretty much every party is sort of in agreement on, of needing to advance mental health care in Canada. And that's another thing that could probably prove to be more cross-party support. And especially now with the new Ministry of Mental Health, whatever that might mean going forward, is just so important as well. And I know that, yeah.
I'm very encouraged by a minister dedicated to mental health. You mentioned at the top of the program, I spent about 6 years on on the board of a mental health hospital, one of the 4 standalone mental health hospitals in the province of Ontario. Our services in the mental health sector have really been stretched, as they have been stretched in every kind of healthcare setting over the last couple of years. But I think, what has happened is a lot of other people, other individuals are now paying much more attention to mental health and the importance of supports for people who are going through challenging periods of time. And look, I mean, the reality is, 2 of 5 of our Canadians will have kind of a mental health issue or know someone who has a mental health issue over the course of their life. But like, everyone has mental health. And so making sure that you have resources and support available for those people who need it when they need it, really important. National Suicide Hotline probably would get all party support tomorrow, assuming it would be introduced. I think the government had, committed to doing that. And so I'm encouraged by that. I think the minister is very capable. I think the minister is very capable, who they appointed, Minister Bennett, and she'll be excellent in that role. She's a doctor by training, and I look forward to working with her.
We'll go on to the third question right now, and it's how can you build on the work that the former Simcoe North MP Bruce Stanton did to continue serving your constituents in your riding?
So as I mentioned previously, Bruce was and is, I mean, he's a fantastic individual, but as a member of parliament, he was incredibly accessible, very well known and well liked in the community. If you thought about customer service, there was a picture of Bruce there. His background, before entering politics, was in kind of the tourism sector. So very, well adept and capable of, serving people, making sure that customer service is top of mind. So obviously there is, a local component here that's very important to maintain and build on, which is being accessible, keeping customer service at kind of the, the center of what members of parliament do is very, very important. And then Bruce also had an incredible career as the longest serving deputy speaker. So the longest serving deputy speaker in the history of the country is that title is held by Bruce. I'm obviously a first term MP. Looking at things like speakerships and stuff isn't something that first term MPs really do. I enjoy policy very much. I'm thankful that I'm on certainly on the finance committee. That gives me an opportunity to learn a little bit more about committees and how to have an impact there. But of course, as a rookie MP, there are so many things you're looking at, just setting up and getting accustomed to and acquainted with, new offices, setting things up, hiring staff, meeting your caucus colleagues for many of which I don't know them. Some of them I knew previously from my time in Ottawa, but many of them are new. There's 119 Conservative caucus members, so I have 118 colleagues to work with, plus a number of senators. And many of them are young and new to the game as well. Maybe there was, getting elected in 2019 for the first time. So I'm encouraged by the kind of renewal that I see within the party at the MP level. But also, Bruce's kind of his example that he leaves is, being reasonable, being thoughtful, really focusing on customer service, having friends in every party. Bruce had friends in every single political party. And so I think that's a real testament to how well he did, but it's a great example for somebody like me and other rookie MPs to follow.
For sure. And I mean, I won't go too deep into this because I still have 2 more questions and we're running a little short on time, but yeah, it's just, again, going back to public service, it's being accessible to your constituents, whatever number there is, usually about 110,000 or so constituents in the riding, being accessible, being a member of the community, being there for them. And really that's the big part that everybody can work on. And like you said, being just being a good person on Parliament Hill and working with everybody and making those important connections. So we're going to go into the fourth question, which comes from Vasu from Ajax. And I know we can go on for hours about this, but recently we saw at the time of this filming, the inflation rate is 4.8% now. It's the highest it's been in 30 years. So Vasu asks, how can a politician such as yourself define inflation and help tackle it? I know it's a big topic, but maybe something that you can say about that.
Vasu, it's a great question, and one I think a lot of people are asking in terms of, what does this mean? It's good that you're thinking about it because it matters. The easiest way to think about inflation, I think, is it operates like a tax. So if one year $100 buys a certain amount of goods, the next year, because of inflation, that same $100 actually buys less amount of goods. So say, inflation rate is a certain amount, you actually can buy fewer goods and fewer things with that inflation. So, if you go into the movies, I don't think it costs $10 anymore, but if it used to cost $10, you could go to 10 movies. Well, but if they move the price of movies to, $15, you're going to far fewer movies next year versus, last year. Now that's an extreme example, but just for, illustration purposes, it's easy to think about it as a tax in that way. And, there's a fair bit of, economists like to make things very, very complicated. Inflation rate and CPI is 4.8%, and they throw around these other terms. But the basics is, the dollar today is buying less than it did last year. And why do we care about that? Well, we care about that because, that actually hurts the affordability. It hurts making life affordable for a number of Canadians, including those who are low income, those who are seniors, those people who are, can't negotiate wages or can't ask for a raise every year to keep up with inflation. And it hurts those people who rely on kind of what they call fixed income payments for a certain amount per month, whether it's from the government or maybe from a retirement fund. You might get X amount of dollars per month every month until, while you're in retirement. And, if that dollar doesn't move in terms of what you get per month, but inflation is at 4.8% or 5% a year, every year, you can afford less. And so that's why we care about it. That's why you're hearing a lot of talk about it. It is, some people call it a silent tax, but it is effectively a tax. And it's never been, you mentioned 4.8%. It's the highest in 30 years, 1991. Most of you, I'm sure, weren't alive then. I was barely alive myself. I was only, 6 years old. So I think it's an issue that should be seizing the government in terms of, they should be focusing a lot of their resources on understanding what government can do to help and or not make things worse. One of the things that makes, that government can do to make this work is by continuing to spend money. When the government decides to spend money, it is competing for resources. So if the government wants to build a new bridge, set aside the fact whether, you think we need to build a new bridge, but if the government wants to, do a large infrastructure project, it has to go hire people. It has to hire equipment. It has to hire other resources to complete that project. Well, those resources now are out of the market and working on the government project. And so that can create pressures and price pressures across the rest of the economy. And you do that on a very, very large scale, it does have an impact.
Well, for sure. And I mean, it's another issue that I know that you're busy on the Hill with. You're at committee meetings, yourself as the deputy shadow minister and the shadow minister, Pierre Poilievre, are very busy on the Conservative benches trying to highlight this issue. And you barely need to highlight it anymore because it's touching everybody now. Everybody's seeing it when they go to the grocery store. The very few things that are at the grocery store now, because the supply chain issues, cost way more. So that's definitely an issue that's only getting worse. And now needs to, as Parliament will be back now, it's something that should be focused on. So we're going to go on to advice for the next generation, where we'll really quickly go over youth involvement in politics and more. So just we asked this to everybody. So what should young high school conservatives do to get more politically active? And one piece of advice that you would give them.
Show up. You have to show up. Campaign office, volunteer, drop literature, ask to do some phone calling, do some data entering. Just be present, and good things will come. Opportunities will come. You'll get to meet a bunch of people. You'll get to make some friendships. I met some of my best friends now, either working on campaigns or being involved in some politics over the years. And the other is, in addition to kind of showing up, find an issue or things that you care about. You don't have to know exactly what it is that you're the most passionate about right now, but if you pay attention to the news and you're informed, the question by Basu about inflation, it's perfect because everyone's talking about inflation today. So if you're informed and you know what's going on, it's a real great asset to have. And if you can get involved in a campaign locally, reach out to your local member, reach out to your local conservative candidate, and they would be glad, to, get you involved, because it's very important. Campaigns don't just happen. Campaigns are run by individuals, and it takes a lot of volunteers to bring a winning campaign together. And if you're encouraged by what you hear in the party, or maybe your conversation with your parents about, which political parties you like, reach out. And if you realize that you're maybe interested in another party, that's okay too. Just stay involved, and you'll eventually find a home where you feel most comfortable. And certainly we hope that it's with the Conservative Party, and we will try to give you tons of opportunities to get involved there. But the truth is, having more young people involved in politics is important, because at the end of the day, 30, 40, 50 years from now, it's going to be your generation that's here living with the consequences of the decisions that are happening today. And it'll be my children that are living with them, and my children's children, and your children. So it's important to have young people at the table now. I think we've got a number of great, excellent, young, new generation MPs in this parliament. Reach out to any of us, and we'd be glad to help you get involved.
For sure. And that's some great advice. And we'll end off on that. So thanks, Adam, for your time today. We really appreciate you being with us, and we wish you well in the future. And we hope to have you back again, maybe one time, to talk maybe about mental health or inflation or something else, whatever. We hope to have you back one day. So that is it. We hope you enjoyed today's interview. You can look for more interviews coming soon. Make sure to follow our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts at Ontario OHSCA for more info about our next interview and for more great content. Make sure to look at our website at ontariohsconservatives.org to learn more about us, see our projects, and for more great content. For our YouTube viewers, like the video, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss a video. For our podcast listeners, make sure to follow us and stay updated with new episodes. We hope to see you all soon.